Hello and welcome back to Timeless Topics. We are excited to share season 2 with all y'all. We're introducing longer form episodes and inviting guests to join our circle this season, so stay tuned for some pretty special episodes. In today's episode, it's just the three of us, and we discuss everything from code switching to implicit bias training to the importance of prioritizing our shared humanity in healthcare. We talk about perseverance, critical thinking, and yeah, we vent a little. We're so grateful you are here with us. Let's jump into the conversation.
You know, in light of what has been, at least on my social media thread for the last few days, has been the death of Miss Janell Green, right? And I felt like this was a platform where we could have some impactful dialogue about that, right? And the implications for what it really means for us as providers, as people in this arena with mothers and babies or birthing persons and babies, right? And hopefully continue to emphasize and highlight the importance of equity care, right? And what that really means and what that looks like. And I think for me, even though I know the numbers, I know the statistics, I know all of the data, it once again hits almost like a punch that this educated, informed, intelligent woman died, right? And I remember many moons ago hearing someone say a statistic that an educated Black woman has the same risk of dying as an uneducated teenage white female, right? Which again, not saying that either of them should, it's just the fact that you think that education and SES will give you a buffer, and it doesn't. And it still baffles me as to why, right? Like I just need someone to tell me why and to break it down to me and explain it to me in a manner that makes sense. But so yeah.
Well, I don't know that's going to make sense, but the answer is racism, right? Because there is no amount of education, money, information, privilege, anything that is going to keep you from being subject to someone's bias. And unfortunately, when it comes to all the isms, right, of all the different types, it's codified in our society and it's codified in the way in which our systems are built. And it ends up creating, you think, awareness, right? Like getting the statistics, getting the data out there. Let's talk about this. That is the first step. But in a lot of people, it becomes like, well, yeah, of course, right? I remember at one of the organizations that I've worked at, we were talking about postpartum hemorrhage, and the provider with multiple decades of experience, the obstetrical provider, was like, well, yeah, Black women bleed more. He himself was a Black man. And I was like, look, I know I'm the NICU lady and like, I don't, really get to have a say in the medical management of this, but you can't say that. Like, you can't just say Black women bleed more and then like mic drop and walk away. You need to ask yourself, why? Why is that number? Like, why is it so high? I'm not arguing that statistically that is what happens, because unfortunately that's what the data shows us. But why? Why is that? And we cannot continue to blame individuals for systematic problems. And that's what this is. Because you have somebody like Dr. Green, who was just a midwife, a professional in her career, knew all of the things on good and bad, right? Knew her own risk factors, fought for people who had her own risk factors that were not her choice. And because, race is not a risk factor, right? You're not born with that. All the other things is what impacts that. She knew that data. She knew the statistics, but still was subjected to it. And I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up and realize that you can't keep asking the individual to fix a problem that is a systematic problem that is causing systematic levels of harm. It's tragic. Every single one of these cases is tragic. And you hope, like, okay, this one will be the one that opens everybody's eyes. But sadly, if that were true, we would have changed everything 20, 50, years ago.
It's just frustrating. It is, it angers me, it saddens me, right? Like I just want to cry sometimes. But then on the other hand, I'm like, okay, well, I've heard all the things, right? And I've been ingrained into the system. So I want to say, well, maybe it wasn't racism, right? Maybe there is something different. And I know that that is that Pollyanna sense of, and I know that that is going to infuriate some people, right? Because I am the one sitting here saying, no, no, it wasn't that, right? Because the system tells you that it wasn't that. And you don't want to believe that about people that you work alongside, people that you trust to some degree, right? But also will tell you that I know for me, a lot of what I do is because deep down I do know that that is the reason for it. And deep down I do know that there is, even if it is just one, it happens more than once, but even if it's just one a year, there's that one family that sees me walk through the door and it's like, okay, right? And I was just speaking with a friend of mine and I was like, and it's so hard to put that into words and to explain it and to not make it look bad for the other side. But then why am I worried about it looking bad to the other side? Right?
Right.
That
Right.
it, and again, that's been ingrained in me and instilled in me that you have to not make other people feel bad about it, right? You don't want them thinking that they're a bad person, but I do. I can't even tell you the number of families that have breathed that sigh of relief and have actually said, "Oh my goodness, thank you. It, cool. I feel good now. I'm gonna leave. I know that you got right." And it's like, I got right. I got you right. And so it instilled a sense in me, and this is why I do what I do, and this is why I keep doing what I do, and why we should continue to talk and walk the walk and demonstrate what should be happening, right?
We have to have these conversations normalized in our environments. I mean, Jess, you do this brilliantly and so confidently and so intelligently. And I think, kind of Tracey, that piece that you described about like, you don't want to make other people feel bad, like all of these other things. That's all by design, right? I mean, all of that has been embedded into the system to just maintain this um, uh, myth of white supremacy. And everybody else is lower on the totem pole. But it's so ubiquitous, it's so freaking sneaky that you don't even realize. I mean, it's like peeling an onion. How many layers of stuff are you toting around that you're not even aware of? And I one of the things when you were sharing, it made me think of from a NICU perspective, right? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not fully immersed. I mean, I have a superficial understanding of the maternity challenges, particularly from a racial perspective. From the neonatal perspective, not an expert there either, but I have dove a little bit deeper into that. And I love that there are some folks that are doing some really good work around looking at the big data and really start peeling back the layers, right? Really start to disaggregate the data, because in all of those data points, and Jess, you say this all the time, and I love it. Every data point is a story. It's somebody's life, and how that story, how that data point has been influenced by multiple factors that have influenced the developmental trajectory of this individual, economically, environmentally, just all of the different ways. And that's not just, other, because I think, and I'll be honest with you, this is how I kind of came to my work and didn't realize that this is how I was coming to my work, but it was all about other, right? I'm the savior here. I'm the nurse, and I'm going to fix you because that's my job. And I love to fix people, but if I'm looking at this from a fixing perspective, and I'm looking at it from a very narrow scope. Geez Louise, am I out in left field without a glove? Because I am not seeing all of the layers that are impacting not only your situation right now, but your vulnerability in healing and recovering and vulnerability for ongoing challenges. That so the work at the dude over at the Beth Israel Hospital here in Boston, Freeman and his team, and that healthcare racial justice assessment tool that really I feel it's so super innovative, so super necessary to start looking at in our system. Because obviously, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? It's the whole world is all messed up. But you just start small and you start to be able to feel comfortable identifying and calling out these different elements, not in a blame situation, but this is an is thing. This is here, and we have an opportunity and a responsibility to address this and respond to it in ways that raise awareness, like you said, Jess, and educate people, but education is not enough. He speaks to, kind of this traditional approach to bias is just having everybody sit down and do a CBT on, your anti-bias training. And how has that impacted bias? It hasn't. All right. And in fact, there are some studies that say the more you talk about getting rid of or drop your biases at the door, it actually increases how you show up with your bias. And so, and that's data. But why aren't we addressing that? I remember, in this work, talking about trauma-informed care and beginning to really appreciate the breadth of it from a racist perspective, from a sexist perspective. And I had many colleagues say, "Oh, don't go there. Don't go there. You don't want to alienate people. You don't want to politicize this. And I think in the world that we live in right now, saying anything that makes anybody feel uncomfortable oftentimes can be viewed as political and automatically seems to shut you down. But I think what we need to take away from that is to just speak louder, speak more clearly, speak more consistently, to really address this in the ways that we can so that we don't feel like it's going to win. We can't let that win when we see these amazing, gorgeous, brilliant, heart-centered, compassionate professionals, people dying from preventable situations.
I think we can highlight here the work that you've done, the publications that you've done to try to raise awareness to how do we bring anti-racism perspectives to the NICU and stop talking about let's just rack up numbers and start talking about how can we actively dismantle this at the unit level. Because to Mary's point, the whole world is messed up, right? The whole world is broken. But I, Jessi Barnes, cannot fix the whole world. But I can start with my backyard. I can start with where I am. And then I can build from there. And I think that's one of the tenets of anti-racism that gets often missed. We look at it, especially as white women, we look at it as perfectionist. Either you're 100% or you're nothing. And if you're not 100%, then don't even bother because you're not fixing anything. Rather than realizing that this is a journey that everyone is on. To Tracey's point earlier, like there's so many internalized racist principles that you don't even, cognitively are not correct, but it is like bred into you from a social training, from an education, from formal training, all of it, right? And breaking down those concepts is a lifelong process. And it's the only thing is keeping on the journey. Taking one step forward. Maybe you take a step to the left, maybe you take half step back, but you're committed to continuing to put one foot in front of the other, even if somebody's got to pull you some of the way or carry you some of the way. Because this work is hard. These systems were built to protect everyone but the individuals that make them up, basically, right? And so they're willing to cause harm to the point of death to anybody to uphold these global systems that benefit a very small minority in the world. And until we realize that power and learn to try to find ways to take it back, unfortunately, this is going to continue to be this work. And I don't say that to be like, oh, we should all give up and this is terrible. But I say that to say, if we could do that, imagine the systems that we could build. Even if we're just talking about the units we work in, imagine what we could do to where more people breathe that sigh of relief, like what Tracey said, when you walk in. And even if it's not based on color, maybe it's based on anything else, right? And you just walk in and someone is like, oh, Mary's here. I know I can go home and take a nap, or I know I can do that therapy appointment and feel okay. And it has no idea, it has nothing to do necessarily with individual characteristics. It's who Mary is as a person and how she's shown that she could show up for somebody else who is in desperate need of someone to show up for them.
And you can feel that, right? Like you learn it very early on. What is a safe space and what is not a safe space. And again, there's some things that I'm just not going to be able to fully articulate. It's just gut, right? Code switching, right? And have
Is that
okay, so when we talk code switching, we talk about this concept that in certain settings, because I don't even know if you recognized it when we first started recording, my tone changed just a hair, right? And I noticed it. I knew exactly when I did it. My demeanor changes a little bit because then it's like, oh, this is now going to be disseminated to people who don't know me and may not understand me. When I talk to you, Mary, and you, Jessi, and it's Mary and Jessi, I'm going to talk to you in a completely different tone than when I'm talking to the Timeless Topics crew, right? I'm gonna switch it up just a little. And it is something that for many underrepresented populations, you learn how to do very early in life. And I can't tell you when, how, where, because somebody once asked me, they were like, how do you do that? And I was like, I don't know. It's just like natural, right? And I can see myself teaching it to my grandchildren already. That this is when you're in this platform, you blah, 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 right? And some people would argue, oh, everybody does that. Maybe not, right? And I remember sharing this with a former colleague who had a different sexual orientation, and we had to talk about how it's not right, it's not okay. I'm not condoning it, but I'm telling you that if you want to make it in this field, you're going to have to code switch just a little bit. I'm not asking you to change who you are as a person, but recognize that when you step into this NICU, historically, we are not there. You are not there. The people that are there are not like us. And so they may not always understand the true, authentic us. So you switch it up just a little bit, right? And it's exhausting. It is emotionally, even physically, right? It's exhausting to have to stop and think about every word that comes out of your mouth and the tone in which you're saying. And there are a lot of people that would say, I don't do it. And they're still successful, right? I don't personally have that courage yet. And I know it's a courage thing. I don't have that, right? And when I catch myself not switching, it's almost like, okay, I'm going in for a fight today, right? And so I'm going to be my authentic me because I don't care anymore. That often that I do that because I do care. And I want to make sure that my voice can be out there and can be heard. And therefore, in this society, you code switch to make that happen.
I mean, and what you just described is a survival strategy.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, this is a trauma response. This is a form of the fawn trauma response because it's a survival strategy. You're seeking safety by whitewashing yourself to be able to be accepted by a threat.
Yeah.
Which is insane, right? But it's
Absolutely.
it's just what it is, right? Because one of the things, as you mentioned, yes, it may just be hitting your own unit, your own backyard, but how impactful that is, right? Because we know how close-knit the world of neonatology is. So even if I am just talking to someone in my backyard, that backyard is overlapping with somebody else's backyard, is overlapping with somebody else's, as we've sat in this circle and kind of figured out where we all connect over the years that we never even knew that we had those connections, right? But talking about them and realizing, oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, I know that person too. That person knows you, right? And that connection. So we're reaching more than what we think we're reaching sometimes. I do think some of the conversations of trying to change the culture, in the last year or two, my biggest focus has been on eliminating the terms wimpy white boy and strong black female, and trying to provide thoughts for why strong black female can be seen as derogatory, right? We all know wimpy white boy, you don't want to call anybody wimpy, right? And whatever. But with the strong black female, we're saying you're strong. Roll with it, right? So from the moment a black female is born, you are told you got this, and you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I can tell you, going into year 50, weight of the world on your shoulders is heavy, right? Like it's heavy. But from the moment I was born, you strong, you got this. What if I don't have this? What if I don't want to have this, right? So trying to get people to realize that it's more about the male than the female, right? So yes, we're strong women, which again could be another problem, but that part is defined in literature. That part is proven with the data. It is the male female thing, right? Fine, cool. Black white, it's not there. Even though we say it's there, it's not there, right? When we look at the numbers overall, our babies are just our underrepresented babies are dying. Our mamas are dying. And when I pulled some data, I looked at it, and it was interesting to me that the infant mortality rate for white babies in the 1960s is at the same level that it is right now in 2026 for black babies. So we have just gotten to where everybody else was in 1960, right? And I'm like, what? Like when you really looked at it was like, oh man, that is really, really bad. And I don't know what to do with it.
That's where like we get stuck in the data sometimes, right? Because you see it and then you're just like, well, shit. Well, like what do we do with that, because it feels like an insurmountable problem. Because in a lot of ways it is, if you're looking at it from a singular focus, kind of like what Mary was saying earlier. You have to decide, okay, this is unacceptable. I'm going to say this is not okay. I do not, 5 years from now, when we're looking at the next retrospective set of data, I want this number to be this many points less, right? A realistic goal, because to go from, 100% to 0% is just not going to happen, right? So you need to go, okay, if we're 100% of the time XYZ is happening, let's shoot for a good solid, maybe, 92%. Right? 90%. Let's do a 10% reduction. And that might not even be possible, right? Depending on what you're dealing with.
Right.
But set these goals and then figure out in a creative, community-minded, inclusive, multidisciplinary, all the different approaches, right? To figure out how can we pull all the different angles of perspective here, most importantly, including the lived experience piece, to figure out how can we actually achieve that 10% reduction. Because if you put a bunch of white people in a room, they're going to come up with an answer. It ain't going to be the right one, but they're going to come up with an answer and a well-written paper about it, right? But you're not going to be able to apply any of it because no one thought to talk to the systems that it is influenced by, nor the people that are actually going to be impacted by this change. So we have to save each other. Like we have to stop this like savior complex of I'm the world's best neonatologist, I'm the world's best statistician, I'm the world's best whoever, right? And I'm going to single-handedly stop this, right? We have to put that crown down and say, okay, who do I know who could help with this project? Who has a perspective that is going to bring something that I can't bring? Kind of like earlier episodes, we talked about like sitting at the conference table, right? Like when you're at a conference and sitting at the table and being like, you look like you're totally different than me. And sure, maybe that's a biased statement, but I'm open and I'm willing to go, I don't know, let's find out, right? Because maybe you're going to walk away with a contact who actually has more, in connection with you than you thought. Because like you said, Tracey, neonatology is such a small world. We're so small. And I think people don't take advantage of that enough. We had a site survey at one of my sites and the lady walked in, she was like, oh, I know you work with Mary Coughlin. And I was like, yes, I do. Who are you? And she was like, oh, I taught Mary Coughlin. And I was like, small world, you know? Um, and like, so it's cool when it happens, but then you're like, right, but what could we do with this? Because if everybody knows everybody in all of this,
Yeah.
that's such a wasted opportunity to really create that like network of change, maybe. Just maybe. Maybe if we can think about it, right? Change is hard, but I do believe we can do it. We just have to work together. No one person is going to fix this, just like no one person is going to solve BPD. Like it is a multidisciplinary problem.
But it
It,
takes us back to increasing diversity, right? And
yes.
making sure that the pool of people that we can pull from to address these issues, that there's enough, that is, again, not just one or two people having to speak up every time because I'm the only Black NNP, right? And so here I am saying, yep, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. And it's like, okay, again, weight of the world,
Right.
right? But our pool is not larger. And I only said Black because whatever. Our pool is not
No.
diverse enough. We're not inclusive enough still, right? Despite all of the conversations. And I think we have to understand that that is important for multiple reasons. It's important. And if we are going to have these discussions and we want to have everybody's perspective, then you do have to have a network of people that can give you those different perspectives, right? If you're sitting at a table where everybody is like you, they may not understand that concept of code switching, right? You need the me at the table to say, let me explain that little piece to you, right? You need the me at the table to say, and it was interesting. One of the hospitals that I currently work at has an educational module on hair and and how to manage children of diverse populations hair, right? But you need that me at the table to say, I don't need you to wash that baby's hair every day, right? Like, because it's going to be a problem, right? You need the me at the table to say, yeah, I understand that that mother brought in whatever oils and whatever and lathered her baby up with that. And instead of us being judgmental about why she did it, let's have a conversation of why she felt like she needed to do it. And it's because we have bathed that baby every day, and his skin is now so dry. And when his mother comes in and looks at him, he looks dirty to her because he is so ashy, right? Like we need to think about those type things, but you have to have the people at the table that can have that conversation. Again, non-judgmental, non-accusatory. It's just what it is, right? And I think because it struck me when you talked about Jessi, Black mothers bleeding more, which again, Mary, I'm in the same boat. It's been so long since I've worked postpartum. I don't know all of the current data, right? But you run this fine balance between saying there is a difference between some races, but why? Right? And not in a negative. And I think that that's where people get cautious because historically those differences were seen negatively, right? Like your head circumference is whatever. Because in the latest physical assessment book of the newborn, they talk about the different size of fontanelles based on race. And I was like, is that important? Do we need to care about that? Should we care about that? Because for me, it triggered that historical aspect that our brains are smaller, right? That we are less than because our head circumferences are different. So I think it's that balance between there are some things that from an epigenetic standpoint are true and are real, right? And it's just what it is. Acknowledge it. And that means that we do need to tailor treatment just a little bit, but it's not a negative. And I think that's where we run into the problem.
What you're highlighting is kind of individualized care, right? I mean, I think I remember when I first heard folks talking about personalized medicine, I was like, oh my God, that's so wicked awesome. And then I did kind of like discovered they're just talking about epigenetics. Not that epigenetics isn't important, and I love that. And when you were speaking about the bleeding issue, I mean, again, wicked detached from perinatal medicine. You're kind of, calling out individual variances in physiologic function based on a myriad of biochemical and epigenetic phenomena that drive that reality. So how about we have a dashboard that actually recognizes that, right? I mean, we have a dashboard instead of just M&M, maybe it's M&M and maybe equity and justice, or and belonging or some, other elements, because the other piece of this is a huge issue. This is a global issue. And what we keep doing, and we do this in a lot of other aspects of life and care and stuff like that, is we make the individual be responsible for remembering all these things. You got to remember all these things. How the heck are you going to remember everything? And so what we need to do is come to the table, with all of the breadth and richness that we have available right now, because we are definitely at a disadvantage because we are super white heavy and we don't really have folks at the table that can really represent in meaningful ways. But that doesn't mean that, we don't have opportunities to explore and make other connections, but we have to have it on the dashboard. It has to be part of how we process the way we show up, the way we interact. I mean, cultural humility, all of these other aspects, and appreciate that in order to really make those variables, data points, whatever you would say on the dashboard, live and breathe, there is a way that we approach it, right? Because we tend to, it seems, default to this super reductionist approach to everything. And again, we're right back at square, one again, I think, when we do that, because then we're not seeing the forest through the trees. We're not, we're stripping away all of the rich multifactorial data that helps us really understand this one point. This one point is more complex than we like to think. And so it's a big shift. And I think for our conversations and all of the wicked awesome conversations we've had in the past, I think we've really called out a lot of the different moving parts, as many other wicked smart people, have also done in the literature and in their clinical practice. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to begin to craft, what does that look like? And what does that path look like to help people show up to the good work that we know that it's in their heart. It's, I'm pretty sure, most folks don't go into this to become billionaires, they go into it for very human-centered reasons, but it's the education piece, and it's the socialization piece. And yeah, maybe we start in the backyard of, everyone's NICU or everyone's place of work, or, whatever that backyard looks like, and begin to, plant the seeds, let it ripple out. I mean, imagine a world where children, like in preschools, are really getting a solid foundation in preserving their awareness of the diversity of the world and the richness of the world. And instead of squeezing that out of children and isolating them, we actually help that, we nurture that beyond. I mean, I know that probably sounds wicked pie in the sky, but I think we have to see the multiple pronged opportunities that we have to address this, because whatever the hell we think we're doing right now, it ain't working.
Well, it didn't sound pie in the sky. You know what I heard? I heard Dr. King, right? I heard what we've been trying to do for years, right? That's what I heard when you said that. And yeah, right. I think that is the ultimate goal. So I'm gonna waffle just a hair here. I'm gonna pose a question for discussion. And I am not smart enough to navigate this through. So maybe there's someone who can navigate it, right? Because I struggle with the concept that I said, I know I said it, that there are certain aspects that are different based on race, ethnicity, background, right? Just goes without saying. I remember when I was first diagnosed with hypertension and we were trying to find the right drug regimen, and my NP struggled with the words to say to me, that this particular drug class is not evidence-based for someone who's Black, right? She really had a hard time coming up with those words. I'd already done my research. I knew I was hypertensive. I knew I needed medications. And so I said to her, just say it, right? Just say it, right? It's okay. I'm fine with that. So I know that there are some things that, yes, that is true. I also know that standardization of care helps eliminate some of those bias, right? If we say every baby who is 24 weeks gestation gets surfactant, high frequency, IV fluids for this long, feeds for this long, we know that standardization of a feeding plan or having a feeding protocol helps reduce the incidence of NEC. Then do we standardize everything? Right? So how do you balance that? And again, it goes back to my thoughts that there's this historical negative connotation with saying that things are different, because from a DNA standpoint, we're really not that different. I think it's what, like 99.9% of our DNA is like all the same, no matter what your background is. But that very tiny percentage does impact certain things. And again, epigenetic changes and all of the things that, again, I am so not smart enough to figure out how to navigate that. But how do you gel all of that into coming up with something for how we treat our babies?
You embrace the nuance of medicine. I think we've lost that, right? Because you absolutely can standardize while still individualizing to the patient that's in front of you, right? You know, there's that old adage in medicine of when you hear hoof steps in the hallway, think horses and not zebras. But if the person rode in on a zebra, then you need to think about zebras, right? But we tend to standardize so much that we take our ability to practice the nuanced art of medicine away, right? And even when you have glaring evidence, like you're looking at lab values, you're looking at subjective or objective data, depending on if the patient's able to give it to you, right? And you're looking at all of these things, and then you're saying, but it doesn't fit this algorithm, so I guess I can't do it. Even though your critical thinking brain and your lived experience says, but maybe this drug class actually would work for this particular person, and I should consider trying it. Trying to do an informed, trying to consult with specialists, like not just cowboy shooting from the hip, right? But like really making it a concerted effort to do the best thing that you could do for this patient, which might be stepping outside of the algorithm, right? But like we said in earlier episodes, you can't abandon the algorithm, because we know that when we do the surfactant, high frequency, IV fluids, standardized stuff, that I know my NEC chances decrease. Now, I can't say it's zero, right? But I can say that it decreases enough to be like, I got to have a good damn reason to step outside of this algorithm. But it does exist. There will be a baby that presents to where you go, my gut is telling me that we should really try this instead, right? Even though I followed everything to the T, because I did everything right, and yet this is still presenting in a way that is not the same. But we're not really taught to embrace those moments. I'm thinking of a discussion that I've had recently with a provider where they're just yelling at me that we don't have enough evidence. And I was like, well, then get the evidence. I don't understand. We have enough evidence to show that this is compassionate use of this product. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence to support this. You waiting for this level of evidence is going to cause harm, and it's going to take 20 years to get there. So either start doing the studies or save the babies. Like, you can't be so beholden to the proof that you're willing to let harm happen. And I think being comfortable in that vulnerable, nuanced place is not a skill set a lot of clinicians have anymore on either side, nursing, respiratory, provider, anybody. I walk into some hospitals, like I was recently in the hospital, and I was like, this is terrifying. We're all going to die. Like, I felt like nobody had the vibe that I grew up in, right? And that I was taught to have. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here because they're going to kill me. And not even intentionally. They're not even going to know they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know? And I remember telling my husband, I was like, no, it's fine. I can take care of myself. I just got to get home.
But see, now you're highlighting a different arena, right? Because then we go into this conversation of medical distrust. And when you were talking about the research, this at least from what I can know from the literature that I've read and even my own perspective, right? I'm not going to participate in the research because I don't trust. And
Right.
so, therefore, the interventions that are based upon data are not going to be impactful for me because I didn't participate in the research. So, my population is not as well represented in that data. So, maybe that particular intervention wouldn't work for my population, but we don't know because we didn't participate in the research because I don't trust you. And now I don't trust you because you gave me this medication and I had a horrible side effect, but it's because we didn't participate in the research,
Yeah.
right? So vicious cycle that again, I'm not smart enough to know how to break it, but I see it happening over and over, not just NICU, like you said, General Hospital, right? You walk into the hospital and you're like, nope, not going to stay here.
Yeah.
I'm going home.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out on my own, right? And now we are setting the stage where people in society are becoming so distrusting. They're not seeking out medical care. Our health outcomes are going to continue to plummet because we aren't getting our routine standard care, but we're not getting it because we don't trust. And so, therefore, by the time whatever problem that is ravaging your body presents, you're so far gone that it seems like, again, they couldn't help me. They couldn't help you because you waited too late,
Yeah.
right? But you waited too late because you didn't trust.
Right.
And so, yo,
I, I think really what you guys are kind of giving voice to is we've stripped the human or the humanity out of healthcare. We run healthcare as a business. And when you run a human-centered process, like a business model, you're not going to get people that, because people aren't cogs, right? I mean, you're not going to get folks to trust you because you're not seeing them. You're seeing their cardiovascular system. You're seeing their pulmonary system. You're not seeing them as a human being. And some of the other elements that were kind of rising up when you were sharing these conversations is you're absolutely right. We don't have the courage to have these conversations. And why? I mean, for a myriad of reasons, all systemic, all built in, right? Because we need to make a profit and we need to keep costs down so we can turn a profit and, and just move people through. And how does that make you feel as a human being? That makes you feel diminished, not seen, not valued. So no, I don't trust you and I'm not going back to you and I'm not going to recommend you. So it's this crazy, vicious cycle that is, again, if we want a different outcome, right, we've got to do this different and not just kind of cross our fingers and hope, well, then maybe the next batch will be better, It's just not how it works. And I think, all of this discussion and even coming back to the racial disparities and the racism that is embedded in the system. Again, if we could come back and this is not Pollyanna-ish, and I know that there's a lot of complexity to doing this, but if we could re-inject the system with a big booster shot of humanity, of meeting people where they are, of courageous vulnerability and incredible cultural humility, maybe we could begin to, reimagine what healthcare is really all about. Because right now we're obsessed with curing and we're kind of half-assed on that one. And we sure as heck aren't healing anybody. We're just adding to more human suffering and in more different ways that extend beyond whatever their primary pathology is. So courage, shared values, I mean, when you work in a unit, um, I never thought about shared values. I just thought punch in, punch out. Like we're never on the same page, and it always changes every month depending on, that was in the days when providers rotated monthly. And so there was no shared approach. It was, whatever the flavor of that month was. And so again, really coming back to um, an identity that is more connected to our mutuality, to our shared humanity, to the we, that is, my me is part of the we, but we're so obsessed with me, ego, 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 ego. I'm better than you. You're down on the food chain, all the things. We're just adding fuel to this system that continues to disrupt, disconnect, dismiss, disrespect, marginalize all of the things. And so I think, again, it's that multi-pronged thing. If I can figure out how to like work on my heart and help my heart feel full and help me feel like I belong, if I can figure that out for me, I might be able to help navigate your journey to, feel like you belong, feel safe, feel seen. And it might sound super fluffy, but it's actually wicked scary to do that. It's wicked uncomfortable. It could be, it could be dangerous in some situations, but we have to continue this conversation because I think, what we kind of kicked off with is wicked important, and it's not a one and done thing. And I'm betting dollars to donuts. Don't ask me where all of these goofy colloquialisms come from, but I'm betting that many of the folks that are listening to this are also struggling with very similar situations. And, the more hands on deck, the more opportunity we have to come up with solutions, Tracey, to that really poignant question that you asked. How do we do this? How do we get on the road to back to healing and back to the good work that we want to do?
I think this is a really important, kind of discussion. These are the discussions that are needed. Like we need to have discussions that do spark something in somebody, even if what it sparks initially is animosity. I want you to sit with that and wonder why.
Yeah.
Like, why does that sting?
Yeah.
Because you got to be a little uncomfortable to grow.
Yeah.
Well, and people don't want to be uncomfortable, right? People want to stick their head in the sand and pretend like these things don't exist, right? But they exist. They happen every day. We started this conversation out talking about Dr. Green, and that happens daily in this country. We are just blessed enough by her work and her now legacy that she's highlighting and showcasing what is happening every day in this country, right? And much respect to her for what she did in her life and now in her death, right? But we have to talk about it. We have to address it. We have to acknowledge that it is happening. And this is somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's wife, somebody's friend, right? This is somebody who matters. Even if they are not as influential as she was, these people who are dying matter to somebody.
Yeah.
And we have to fix it.
Yeah.
I had a nursing school professor who would get fired up, and I'm so thankful for her. Dr. McCusick is amazing. And she would always end those, discussions with, you have to remember that every single person that you care for is somebody's somebody. They might not be somebody to you. They might not have a relation to you, but they belong to somebody. And you have to treat them the way that you would want your people to be cared for. And if you can't do that, then you don't need to bother going and getting your license.
I love that.
I love that too.
Because it framed from the very beginning, from nursing school, it framed this idea that the privilege that I have to try to help somebody through a hard time, right? And to be able, the privilege that is equally a responsibility, right? This person is owed a successful outcome. And if it doesn't come, then I'm going to die trying to get it there, right? But it taught me from the beginning that if I can't see that person as a person, then don't even bother.
Yeah.
Go do something else. Because there's plenty of jobs in the world. There's plenty of other things you can do. But if you start from a place of depersonalization and dehumanization, it only gets worse from there.
Amen.
Timeless Topics is Jessi Barnes, Tracey Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jessi Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.